Welcome to another Founder Wisdom Pod. We have Renato Beninatto with us today. He is chairman and co-founder at Nimdzi Insights. So today we're going to talk about growth, translation, localization, future insights, and market research. This pod is brought to you by podpar.com. It's my podcasting company. If you want to start, scale, be invited to podcast and monetize the unconventional way, because a bunch of people give up podcasting because they don't make money. So I help people do their ikigai, because interviewing folks like Renato is pretty fun, and it's profitable too. So go to podpire.com if you need help with that. Renato, welcome to the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and about Nimdzi.
Thank you, Charles. It's a pleasure to be talking to you. And I've seen several episodes of your podcast, and it's really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you. Nimdzi is a market research and consulting company in the language industry. We work with concepts like translation, localization, internationalization, transcreation, essentially doing business. And one of the things that we have in common is that we talk about growth. And I think that the main focus of Nimdzi is to help companies grow in the international market, leveraging the power of language. One of the things that I like to say is that language is a multiplier and an enabler. It allows people to use your product in different countries, in different languages. And we don't even need to go to different countries. The United States is fascinating, is the biggest market in the world. And there are more than 30% of US households don't use English as their language at home. And we at Nimdzi work with companies that want to leverage and take advantage of that growth opportunity inside any market.
You started this business, if I look at your LinkedIn here, around 6 years ago.
Yeah.
What objectives that you set for yourself back then, 6 years ago, and have you accomplished these now that we're in 2024?
Well, the objective, this is the second market research company that I set up, right? And market research providing information, insights, and knowledge about a specific market can have different shapes and forms. And up until in 2017, I was frustrated with the type of content that I was consuming, that it was very academic, very strict in the way that it was presented. And our goal, my business partner and mine, was to democratize information. So instead of building firewalls and paywalls for content, most of our content is free. The value in our consulting and our knowledge is in the conversations that we have with the clients after they read the research. The research is data. One of the things that I learned many years ago is that content wants to be free. It wants to be out there. It wants to be free so that people can have access to it and read it. So we make our content accessible, and we transform the consumers of our knowledge into clients when we can create value for them. And the value doesn't come from a graph or a ranking or a list or an insight or an infographic. Knowledge comes from the application of that knowledge to the business problem that the client needs to solve.
And what are these top problems that your clients are experiencing nowadays with the advent of AI, with some inflation and some of the downtrends we've been seeing last year?
Well, I tend to have a different view of that. And one of the characteristics of the language industry is that it's an industry that is impervious to crisis. I've been in this business since 1983, so it's 40 years observing the development of this industry. And it's an industry that grows with three vectors. It grows because there's more content being created, and AI is contributing to a content explosion. There are multiple languages. Every year, the average number of languages in the Fortune 500 websites 10 years ago was 22 languages. The average in 2023 was 32 languages, 10 languages more in a decade. That is the trend. There's always more language because there are more markets. And once you add a language, you don't remove it because there's business coming from that. And there is a third factor, which is what I call platform proliferation. It's a hard word. The platform for proliferation is that once you would publish content in your website, and then now you have video, you have different social media platforms, you have all kinds of software that is used to generate that content. So the more platforms you have, the more translation you need, the more formats you have to deliver your content. So there's always a factor of growth. But definitely 2023 was a year of fear, let's put it this way. I don't think that for the language services, people need to communicate. It's about communication. And when there is a crisis, people need to communicate more, nor less. And if there is more communication, there is more translation. But the factor that happened in 2023 was the hype of AI. So everybody was expecting AI to replace translation. If you looked at the lists that people would make of professions and careers at risk, translation would be listed there. Anything related to content, you would have as a profession at risk. But that promise didn't materialize. What happens is that if you think the main concept, the two things that are at the foundation of AI are LLMs, large language models. We have the word language there. And the second one is GPT. And the T in GPT is transformer. It's the transformer model. The transformer model, something that was developed by Google when they created neuro machine translation in 2016. So in 2016, the machine translation that Google offers for free on their website moved from a statistical-based machine translation to a neural-based machine translation. And that represented a significant improvement in the quality of machine translation. And what enabled that improvement was this transformer model, which is a way of treating content that accelerates and combined with the concept of generative AI, allows you to create these strings of text that make sense and sound very natural, even though sometimes they're not necessarily correct. So AI, machine translation is the highest form of AI. So even inside our industry, people didn't realize that we have been using AI for a decade in language services, and that ChatGPT and this commercially available generative AI solutions, they perform much worse than the traditional machine translation models that we have in place. They are slower, they're more expensive, they're less accurate, and they're less reusable, right? Every time you translate something in ChatGPT, it's going to be different from the previous time. So you don't have the consistency that professional services provide. So generative AI came into this industry, and everybody thought that it was disruptive, as it was in many other areas of knowledge. But in the language industry specifically, I like to say that it was intrusive and annoying instead of being disruptive. So in the beginning, everybody saw the promise of saving money with generative AI, but that promise has not materialized yet. So a year plus into the generative AI revolution, the impact in the language industry has been more as disruptive in the way that we talk about translation than in the way that we do the things that we do. So I think that 2024 is that moment where things are going to settle and we're going to go back to more intelligent conversations about how to use generative AI.
And what would be your top goals for this year as this man with a bunch of successful exits and Nimdzi doing pretty fine, having this strong reputation? Like, what's your area of focus this year?
So the area of focus is using a religious analogy, is essentially preaching the gospel and letting people know that there is opportunity to grow in an environment where the management, the leadership of organizations thinks of AI as a disruptor and a money saver, where the reality is that you save money by not using it in our space. So this is sharing the knowledge and the experience based on data and on real examples that we have, but also to contribute in a way to help the clients that we have at Nimdzi, the large enterprise that works with us, in selecting the the right technology for their challenges that they have. One of the things that our research covers is what we call the language technology atlas. I don't know if you can see, there's a poster on my wall there, a colorful poster, where we track over 1,000 technologies in language services that are categorized by the function that they do. And one of the things that I like to say that we learned with machine translation that AI users are going to learn is that you have a classic problem of the paradox of choice. Some time ago, I wrote an article before AI. I wrote an article called the Machine Translation Sommelier and the Paradox of Choice. And the reason is that in our atlas, there are 87 machine translation solutions, right? But when I talk to you who are not an expert in this space, you think of machine translation, you think as an entity. You think of machine translation as Google Translate or so on. Or if you're using Bing, there is Bing Translate. Or if you're using Apple, they have their own translation engine in their technology. So we tend to think of machine translation as one entity when you have 87 tools that are available. If you have 87 tools, you need help, because which one is best for the type of content that I have? There is one that is better for marketing. There's one that is better for chemistry. There's another one that is fantastic from Danish to Japanese, but is not very good from Japanese into Italian, for example. So you need to have, there is an element of complexity that makes translation not a simple task. It's actually the most complex task for artificial intelligence is dealing with language translation. And also, one of the things that is a classic problem that is already identified with AI is that AI is trained mostly in English. 50% of all the content that is used to train AI is English based. So it's very good to translate from Spanish to English, from French to English, from Japanese to English, but it's not as effective to go from English to the other languages. And there is a big gap in the what AI can do in the 10 most common languages that are used in the market: French, Italian, German, Spanish, Brazilian Portuguese, Russian, Chinese, Japanese, and so on. But when you start going down into Croatian or Swahili or Hmong or Vietnamese and so on, the quality of the output of AI is not as impressive as it is with the dominant languages. And that's a missed opportunity, right? It's a, you think that you can solve everything with AI, and machine translation handles about 100 to 120 languages with a certain level of quality, while AI will start falling down very quickly after the 10th language pair. So
So
there's a lot of complexity, lots of opportunity there.
as a guy from Montreal, a business-oriented person, I speak most of the time English. I speak here in Mexico and Spanish with my wife, but French is sort of taking the door, you know. The only reason why I'm still speaking French is to keep on some neurons in my brain and have a better performing brain, because else I didn't see any advantage. My past self was like, why would I speak a language that is complicated? But it seems to me that if we just delete some languages, we might lose some specific knowledge or some neuron parts of our brain. So, am I right in saying that? And wouldn't it just be better for the world to just have like one language, speak one language so that we're all on the same page?
You're coming up with a biblical problem, right? It's the classic Babel problem. But anyway, no, and this is not realistic, right? Even if you think about English, uh, you just go north of the border here to Canada, and the pronunciation is different. The words are different. Uh, Quebecois Canadian French is very different from French when you're home talking about things. And one of the interesting things that I noticed in research over the years is this concept that I call the underwear effect, right? Once you're in a professional setting, when you're working in a suit, let's put it this way, you're going to an office environment, you absorb and you're fine speaking a foreign language. But once you are, the closer you are to being in your underwear, in the comfort of your house, the more you revert to your uh, native language, right? Usually you curse, you count, you do math, you express emotions in your native language. I speak 5 languages fluently. I've lived in 7 countries, but when I need to calculate tips, I do the math in Portuguese in my head. Um, there are many more, and this concept of the uh, uh, dominant language and so on, it has changed over the years. I mean, in the 1400s, it was Portuguese. If you travel to Asia, if you travel to Africa, and you look at the names of the cities, the neighborhoods, and landmarks, they will all have a Portuguese origin, because the Portuguese were the ones discovering the world and uh, developing trade with the world. If you look later, the French had was the language of diplomacy. It was the main language around the world until English took over because of the United States, and this is a relatively recent phenomenon. Right? But it could be Chinese. It could be, depending on the part of the world, the lingua franca changes significantly. I was recently in Africa, and I learned that there is a language that is spoken in Central Africa, which is Lingala, which is a relatively simple language with elements of French, English in it, and so on. And that's the Passepartout language that they have in that space. In Nairobi, there is a new language that has developed, and I just blanked. I forgot the name of the language, but there is music in that language. It's a mix of Swahili, English, and other local dialects where that they speak in that environment. So language is very alive and very contextual, right? The fact that we speak a Portuguese in Brazil that is different from the Portuguese in Portugal is not only because of the distance, but also the experience. We are a tropical country. Portugal is a European country. The objects, the climate, the description, the things that you use are very different. And even though the language is the same, there are words that we don't understand from each other because you don't have them. You don't have heating systems in the homes in Brazil. You have air conditioners, right, and fans and so on. But it's a beautiful dream. Imagine all the people, right? So
Right. Well,
you're from Montreal?
yeah, Montreal. I live in
Okay.
Mexico. English speaking 80% of the time, 15 Spanish and 5%
So
French.
your
But I
name is
speak
not Charles Cormier, as I thought, is Charles Cormier.
Charles Cormier. Yeah,
There you
that would
go.
be the
You
name.
see, this is the problem with languages and names, right? And this comes into localization is a big problem. I was reminded yesterday. I met a person at an event from Indonesia, and she has only one name. It's not a first name and a last name. It's one name, and it's very common in Indonesia. But software is not prepared to handle that. Like I have three nationalities and three passports, and my name is different in each one of the passports. These create problems for products, right? This create problems for growth. How do you sell your services in Europe from the United States? Depends a lot on how you allow the clients to buy from you. They don't have a social security number. They don't have the format of their phone numbers is different. Their postal code uh, conventions are different, and these are things that have a significant impact in and this is what we call in our industry internationalization elements.
It just seems that in Quebec, it's such an ego thing to want to keep the French language. That's probably like 80 to 90% of it. This is like, oh, we lost this war to English people, and now we just want to break everyone's balls with having to name your business in French, and that just removes business out the country. Then people complain that, they don't have enough cash to survive. Um, so it's just like, I mean, you mentioned the Bible is just like religions wouldn't, I mean, diversity is great, right? But it would be nice to just be aligned on one thing, just trade more with one another. I believe trade is very good for the world. So
Mhm.
what's your take on that? Isn't at what point does diversity becomes a source of ego and a source of conservatism and not moving forward?
Well, I think it's a matter of identity, right? We tend to have so one curiosity. Most people don't know that the United States doesn't have an official language, right? People assume that English is the official language of the United States. Canada has two official languages. It's English and French are co-equal languages according to the Canadian Constitution. But the United States doesn't mention official language in the Constitution. So any American citizen can require and demand services in whatever language they want, court services, health services, and so on. And the state is required to provide it. And you might think from a negative perspective or an exclusive perspective that is bad. But from my perspective, the American market is the biggest translation market in the world. There's a lot of opportunity happening here. The state of California publishes their content in 13 languages. So look at how many jobs it's creating for translators, how much easier it is making for the consumers, the taxpayers in California to pay their taxes and vote and do all their services in whatever language they prefer to use, right? And so the interesting thing about language, it has to do with identity, right? With how you feel about yourself and how you enjoy the rights that you have. I'll give you an interesting example that has nothing to do with law. It has only to do with business, and it has to do with the immigrant population in a certain country. So in Sweden, there are many immigrants from Arab-speaking countries, and they represent 20% of the population these days. And one of the problems that commercial renters were having in Stockholm was that the tenants were not following the rules. They have like a shared laundry room. They have parking garage spaces, and they have lots of rules and times and things that they need to address. And some of these condos were issuing fines for the tenants because they were not following the rules, until a smart property owner decided to translate the rules into 3 languages and post them and share them with the tenants. All the problems disappeared because it was okay. We have hours to use the laundry room. You have to take the laundry and put it outside of the dryer, etc., etc. And once people could understand the rules, the quality of life improved for everybody else. Instead of complaining because people weren't following the rules, everybody followed them. And there is no, it cost them, I don't know, $200, $300 to do an effort that saved everybody a lot of concern and money. The reality is that diversity, one of the elements that you discussed before, is that every year there are several languages that disappear from the face of the earth, but every language comes with a body of knowledge with it. The classic example of the Inuktitut, the language of the Eskimos in the northern territories in Alaska, in Greenland, and in Russia. There's so much knowledge about local wildlife, about snow, the classic that they have, I don't know, 70 words for snow. and there's so much knowledge. And the same thing with Indians in the Amazon that have knowledge about plants and rivers and fish and things like that is not captured in our native languages. So diversity is good because it doesn't take anything from us. It gives us more. It gives us more knowledge, more experience, more shared experience. And as a business, it gives you opportunity to differentiate. So for telephone companies, the more languages they offer, the more people they have engaged in their platforms. And for commercial companies, banks, a lot of business in banking come from immigrants in wherever, it doesn't matter, in Europe, in the United States, in Asia, that send money back to their homes. So you go to places like Philadelphia, you will see a lot of ads for banks in Korean because there is a big Korean community there. You go to Minneapolis, there is a lot of stuff in Somali and Ethiopian and Aramaic advertisement, because that's the community that spends money in there. So and one of the things that I like to say is that translation addresses all the aspects of human activity, all aspects of business. And I like to say that translation is like toilet paper. It's only important when it's not there. It's cheap and nobody knows how much it costs. If you ask 3 people how much they spend on toilet paper, nobody knows. But it's a product that you use every single day, right? And translation is the same thing. It's in there and you don't even know. Your computer, in order to be able to function, there was a lot of translation that happened behind the scenes that you didn't even know, through the supply chain, through the assembly, the manufacturing processes, and so on. And your computer, your phone, any appliance around you in your home will have a heavy component of translation in it, and you don't even know. But what has been interesting for our industry is platforms like Netflix have made international productions very popular in the United States. Usually, you would have all over the world, you would have American productions translated into the local languages, TV series, and so on. But if you watched Money Heist, Casa de Papel, it was all translated from Spanish, Lupin from French, and you have the opportunity to listen to foreign languages and read the subtitles like most of the world does.
Interesting
And since we talked
perspective.
about
Yeah,
since
go
we
ahead.
talk about religion, just a little comment there. What I like to say is that God speaks to you through a translator, which is very dangerous because translators make lots of mistakes too.
Oh yeah, that's a very good point, and the title of an entire other podcast. Where can people find out more about you, Renato?
Well, nimdzi.com, Nimdzi. Nimdzi is a word in Fante, which is a language from Ghana, and it means knowledge. And or find me on LinkedIn and connect with me. I'd love to hear from you and share more information, knowledge, curiosity, and so on.